Marc Lobliner, CEO, MTS Nutrition, Chief Marketing Officer, TigerFitness.com, creator of the Outright Bar, as well as partner in the Ambrosia Collective and Iron Addicts Gym in Long Beach, California. So we have a new awesome study on intermittent fasting. Now, the reason I really love this is the bias actually appears like it should be for intermittent fasting. Now, the doctor, one of the co-authors of this study, his name is Ethan Weiss. He's a cardiologist at the University of California, San Francisco, and he's a guy who's been time-restricted eating for the past 7 years and actually is a huge fan of it. So his bias was for the diet, but as a credible and just a great researcher, he put all those biases aside and commissioned a very good study. Now, the reason this really excites me is it actually has a decent sized group. We've had intermittent fasting studies in the past. The lean gain study, I have a video on this very channel. And basically it showed it doesn't really do much. So as a researcher, it'd be cool to have a study that countered that, right? But if you're doing a study, all bias is out the window and you just go by the findings. So basically, intermittent fasting is time-restricted eating. A lot of times what people will do is a 16-hour fast and then an 8-hour feeding window. So for example, you eat your last meal at 10 p.m. and then you don't start eating again until 2 p.m. the next day. So that gives you from 2 to 10, which is 8 hours to get all of your macronutrients and meals in. So there is suggested evidence that intermittent fasting can improve metabolic function, stave off certain diseases, and may even extend lifespan. Going off of the hypothesis that autophagy, which is the killing off of your body's unneeded dead cells, or your body getting rid of these cells, these nasty, dirty cells that you don't need anymore, right? That it will have all these beneficial effects, as well as controlling your fasting glucose, controlling your insulin. And another thing is, since you're restricting the time you can eat, it gives you less time to mess up on your diet. So you're able to, well, cut calories. So in this study, they tracked 116 obese and overweight individuals over 3 months. Now, they discovered that it doesn't really do much. Now, as you look at this study, what it examined is how fasting influences weight metabolism. So a couple things to take note. Number one is that the study subjects actually took less steps. So by fasting, we can assume they were tired and they were hungry, so they stayed less active. So that's a first takeaway. Number two is that they had no benefit in any of the measurable parameters, right? They had no benefit in fasting glucose. So here's the actual thing. On average, the fasting participants walked about 2,500 fewer steps a day. And of course, that will affect whether you lose fat or not. There were no improvements in fat loss, and there were no improvements in any of the measured blood markers. And as you look at the lean gain studies and other studies, we can actually have the fact that in some, it was very small, but there was a deleterious or negative effect on testosterone levels in males and on thyroid levels. Now, those weren't big enough to look at, to even pay attention to, but they were there. Now, as I'm going to say, more data is needed, more research is needed, and I'm not going to come here and defecate all over intermittent fasting. I actually think for some people it's awesome. For example, some people just don't like breakfast. For other people, they have trouble not snacking throughout the day. So by taking out the ability to snack between 10 p.m. and 2 p.m., it gives you the ability to avoid those unwanted calories. Now, from a personal anecdote, I have tried intermittent fasting. What intermittent fasting did to me is it made me, I was really hungry, but I was mentally alert, very mentally alert during the fasting period. I was probably alert that I was really freaking hungry. But once that period lifted, I was ravenously hungry, and I probably ate more calories than I would have had I not fasted. So my recommendation, another thing to look at, in this study, they didn't measure a lot of things. For example, it wasn't controlled. These people were just eating what they would be eating. So one thing we need to understand is, was their protein high enough? So the fact is, these subjects actually lost more lean mass than the non-fasting subjects. So the question is, number one, did they eat enough protein within their feeding period? And number two, was the protein spread out? So if I have 8 hours to eat protein, I'm gonna literally every 2 to 3 hours take in a good protein feeding of probably around 20 to 40 grams of protein. Now, if I had one big meal and I took in, let's say, all 200 grams of protein in that one meal, that would be less effective for muscle protein synthesis. So there's another variable in this diet. This was not controlled. So my opinion is, for these enthusiasts, right, it's going to be less of an issue, because if you are a bodybuilding, fitness, physique enthusiast, or just someone really concerned about their health who measures all their meals, you're going to be like, okay, at 2 p.m. I'm going to have 50 grams of protein. At 4 p.m. I'm going to have 40 grams of protein. You're going to set it up and you're going to be more serious. But for the average Joe off the street, for the average person, weekend warrior, might go to the gym 2 to 3 times a week, they might not be as stringent with their diet practices. So we need to make sure that these protein feedings are spaced out. There's a lot of questions to be answered still. The one thing I will state with certainty is that the intermittent fasting zealots who came at me and were very, very, very mean when I questioned the validity of this holy grail of dieting that cures cancer, they literally said this, okay? They literally said that, well, with autophagy, you can't get cancer. Okay. They said you can't get fat. Okay. They said it literally cures diabetes. Now, another caveat. These fasts were probably not long enough. I've stated on record multiple times there are tremendous benefits to longer fasts, 24 plus hours. I believe autophagy, they've shown in data, starts around 14 hours. When your body actually starts to kill off those cells, you start to get the benefits. So starting eating at let's say 2 p.m., when your autophagy literally started kicking in at 1 p.m., that doesn't give it enough time to do much of anything. That's like starting your lawnmower for 5 minutes and not even getting on the grass, right? Like you didn't cut any of the grass. You started the lawnmower, but the grass is still long, and your HOA is still gonna find you and write you a letter, and some stupid woman in a golf cart is gonna drive by your house and report you to HOA. Not that that's ever happened to me. It actually hasn't, but it's a thing. It's a suburban thing. Y'all living in suburbs, you understand what I'm talking about. Karens are everywhere. You gotta be careful of Karens. It's like, are you afraid of COVID? No, I'm afraid of Karens. So, my opinion on intermittent fasting pretty much stands. It's very individual. Some people really don't like breakfast. Some people feel better and more mentally into it, more mentally attuned when they fast. For me, I've done everything. I feel best when I eat frequently. I feel best when I, have a steady flow of nutrients. And I feel best when my energy levels are sustained. And while you can argue that it levels out your blood sugar, your insulin, and all that good stuff, I never got that. I do better when I eat less, more frequently. So there's a lot of things to be answered. The next studies that need to be done are obviously, let's take a controlled study, right? Let's take a controlled study and let's put them on a controlled diet. Okay, we're going to take the same exact foods, same exact calories, and then we're going to have the fasting group eat those calories within an 8-hour window or a 10-hour window or whatever they decide that window to be. We're going to have the other group eat it over the course of a day. And that'd be very hard to do because these are studies where you're relying on reports. And people lie. They even lie on reports. I hear they even lie in election polls. So the bottom line is we have no idea on how to conclusively conduct a study. There would never be a study that goes, hey, intermittent fasting doesn't work 100%. What we can do is do enough research to indicate something. And then there might be more counter research done to indicate the opposite over time. I've changed my views 400 times on so many different subjects. So right now, if you were to hold a gun to my head and say, does intermittent fasting work for a majority of people? I would say, define work. Just kidding. I would say for most people, intermittent fasting is unnecessary and may even be counterproductive to reaching their health and weight loss goals, and to also gaining lean mass if that is your goal. However, I will also state a caveat at the end with a footnote. More research is required and we need to keep studying fasting. And also another note, this does not include long-term fasts for health. By long-term, I'm talking 24 or more hours. That's all I got for you guys. I'm going to link the study down below. I appreciate you guys watching. This is my take on it. If you like intermittent fasting, don't take this as me pooping all over what you like to do. If you're an intermittent fasting guy, if you're Lean Gains himself, by all means, don't take this as a knock to you. This is simply my interpretation of the data. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Follow me on Instagram at Marc Lobliner, Twitter at Marc Lobliner, Facebook at Marc Lobliner. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and of course, if you haven't already, I took them away. Buy a bunch of outright bars. I used to have them right there behind me, but I got these boxes right here. Buy outright bars. They're absolutely delicious, and they help pay for this wonderful production we have going on here. Thanks so much, guys. That's not a game.